I had always been the one who gave. It wasn't just the money, though there was plenty of that, especially with the business I'd built from the ground up. No, I gave my time, my energy, my patience, especially for my family. But in the last few years, it had started to feel like the giving was one-sided, and no matter how much I gave, it was never enough to earn any appreciation. Then came that text. I never saw it coming, and it hit me like a truck. I was sitting in my office just finishing up a call when my phone buzzed. It was from Brianna, my daughter. A simple message, no real preamble. "Hey Dad, just wanted to let you know we're going to spend Christmas quietly with the in-laws this year. We won't be able to make it to your place. Hope you understand." At first, I thought I'd misread it. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe I'd missed something. But no, there it was, clear as day. A rejection wrapped up in polite words, but a rejection all the same. I felt my stomach drop. For years, I had been the one footing the bill for their tuition, their weddings, vacations, the small things they could never seem to afford. I'd always told myself it was my role. It was just what family did. But now, for the first time, it felt like I was invisible, not even worth the effort to have around for the holidays. They didn't need me. They only needed my money. And the realization hit me harder than anything else ever had. I had spent years sacrificing for them, and now, when I needed to feel like I mattered, they weren't even asking me to come. I took a breath. I could feel the anger bubbling up, but I kept it contained. I typed out a quick reply. "Enjoy yourselves." It was short, it was curt, but that was all I had left in me, and in that moment, I finally saw the truth. This wasn't about love. This wasn't about family. It was about what I could provide. After the rejection, I walked through my new villa, my mind racing. The place still felt fresh, like the scent of new paint in the air and the echo of my footsteps on polished floors. This was the culmination of years of work, my own efforts finally paying off. The space was vast, elegant, but at that moment, it also felt empty. The echoes of the mansion seemed to mock me as I thought about Brianna's text. The Christmas dinner, or rather the lack of one, still stung. For the first time in ages, I felt the weight of all the sacrifices I had made for my family, the years of paying for tuition, covering wedding expenses, giving them what they needed. In return, I got a curt "enjoy yourselves" from my own daughter. That was the truth of it. I had been nothing but a provider, and nothing more. I stopped in front of the fireplace, looking at the large windows that overlooked the city. The villa represented everything I had worked for, everything I had built with my own two hands. But right now, all I could think about was how I had let people take advantage of me for so long, and that had to change. For the first time in years, I felt the need to reclaim my life, not just my wealth, but my dignity. No more waiting for invitations from people who didn't appreciate me. I would create my own celebration, one that meant something, one where I could actually feel like I belonged. I picked up my phone and texted Robert, my brother. He was the only person who had never treated me like a bank or an afterthought. I told him about my plans for Christmas dinner, my desire to spend it with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could give. Robert responded almost immediately. "Count me in, brother. I've been saying you need to stop letting her run you around." His words hit me hard, but they were true. Brianna had manipulated me for years, and I had let it happen. But not anymore. This Christmas would be different. It would be a celebration of who I was, someone who had worked hard, who had made sacrifices, but who was now standing up for himself. I started making calls, confirming the guest list. Old business partners, close friends, people who knew me, respected me, and who didn't just come around when they needed something. I realized that I had surrounded myself with the wrong people for too long. I wanted those who would appreciate me for my accomplishments, not my bank account. The more I talked to Robert and the others, the more the excitement grew inside me. This was mine, mine to organize, mine to enjoy. For the first time in a long time, I felt the joy of anticipation instead of the anxiety that usually came with family gatherings. This wasn't about obligation. This wasn't about duty. This was about me finally taking control. I could already picture the night. Laughter, great food, real conversation, people celebrating me not because of my money, but because I was finally standing up for myself. I could feel the weight of years of giving lifting off my shoulders. It wasn't a heavy burden anymore. It was freedom. I looked around the villa again, feeling something I hadn't in a long time: pride. For once, it wasn't about making everyone else happy. It was about doing something for me. I sent one last message to Robert. I'm looking forward to this. Christmas is going to feel different this year. The days leading up to the dinner were a blur of planning, organizing, and preparing for something that had been a long time coming. Each task I took on felt more satisfying than the last. The villa, once a symbol of my success, but also a quiet reminder of all the things I had given up in pursuit of financial stability, was now becoming my sanctuary. A place where I could finally breathe, where I wasn't just the one who gave, but the one who was allowed to live. I wasn't just preparing a Christmas dinner. I was preparing to reclaim my dignity, my peace, and my sense of self. The excitement began to build as I went over every detail with precision. The catering order had been confirmed, and I made sure it was something special, not just for the sake of showing off wealth, but because I wanted to honor the people who would be there, those who genuinely appreciated me. The seating arrangements came next. I wanted this to be an evening of connection, of real conversations, not just polite small talk. I wanted my brother Robert at the head of the table, not just because he was my brother, but because he was one of the few people who had never treated me as a bank. My business partners, longtime friends who had supported me in ways my family never had, were also included. They were the ones who had seen my hard work, who had respected me not for what I could give, but for who I was and what I had accomplished. They were the ones who had earned a seat at my table. As I walked around the villa, I admired the little touches that had come together over the past few weeks. The twinkling lights on the tree, the fire crackling in the hearth, the polished surfaces and soft, inviting warmth that filled every corner of the place. This was the life I had built from the ground up, and for the first time, I could truly enjoy it, not just for what it represented in terms of money, but for what it meant in terms of personal achievement. I took a moment to step outside, looking out at the sprawling view. The night was crisp, the air filled with the scent of pine. I felt a deep sense of gratitude, not for the things I had given away, but for the things I had built for myself. It wasn't just the villa or the wealth. It was the peace of mind I had fought so hard to achieve. This was the life I had worked for, and I wasn't going to let anyone, least of all Brianna, take that away from me again. I made a few final calls to confirm the guest list. As I spoke to each person, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't known in years. The weight of family obligations, those silent, unspoken demands for my money, my time, my attention, was lifting. The more I talked to Robert, the more I realized how much I needed this. Not just the event itself, but the affirmation of my worth, not just as a provider, but as a person. "Everything's set," I said to Robert later that night when I called him to confirm one last time. "It's going to be a real celebration, one where I'm not just the one giving." "I'm proud of you," Robert responded. "This is your moment. Take it. We've all been waiting for you to do this." That was the moment I realized just how much I had been missing, not just the respect I deserved, but the simple act of standing up for myself. For years, I had been waiting for someone to see me as more than just the guy who could pay for things. Now, I was going to show them who I was. As the days passed and the villa slowly transformed into a welcoming space for real celebration, I found myself anticipating the evening not with nervousness or anxiety, but with joy. This dinner was going to be a reminder, not just to Brianna, but to everyone, that I was more than what they took from me. I was a man who had earned everything he had, and this Christmas I would finally be celebrated for that. I could hardly wait for the day to arrive. The day of the dinner arrived, and with it, a mix of excitement and relief. I had spent the past few days meticulously planning every detail, ensuring that everything would be perfect, not just for my guests, but for myself. This evening was more than a simple Christmas gathering. It was my chance to celebrate who I was, not just for what I could give, but for what I had worked so hard to build. I stood by the front door of my villa, looking out at the driveway. The large glossy doors stood open, and I could already hear the hum of conversations as the first few guests began to trickle in. The scent of the warm, spiced dinner I'd carefully selected for the evening wafted from the kitchen, and for the first time in a long while, the air was filled with something other than the hollow, empty feeling I'd become so accustomed to. This wasn't just any dinner, it was mine. Robert was the first to arrive, with his wife Linda in tow. As they stepped into the foyer, their eyes immediately widened in admiration. Robert slapped me on the back, a grin spreading across his face. "This place, man. You really outdid yourself," he said, looking around. "You've come a long way." "Thanks," I replied, feeling a genuine sense of pride. I had worked hard to get here, and it felt good for someone to recognize it. It feels like a home, finally. Linda, always the more composed of the two, smiled warmly. It's beautiful, really. You've made something incredible. The words meant more than I let on. For so long, I had been seen as the guy who just had the money, the one who could pay for things, but never truly valued for who I was or what I had built. To hear these simple words of appreciation, not tied to money, was a breath of fresh air. This wasn't about me being a provider, it was about me being a person. Soon, the others began arriving, longtime friends, former business partners, and a few colleagues who had always seen me as more than just a checkbook. I watched them enter the villa, their faces lighting up with admiration. Some, like Robert, had known me for years, while others had only known the business side of me. But tonight, I wasn't just the owner of a successful wine bar, or the guy who could fund a lavish holiday. Tonight I was just a man they respected, not for what I had, but for the life I had built and the choices I was making now. The conversations flowed easily. We talked about everything: work, life, travels, even politics. But no one here was talking about what I could give or how much money I made. They were talking to me like I was a peer. And for the first time in years, it felt right. It wasn't forced. It wasn't transactional. As the evening wore on, I found myself taking in the moment, letting the sense of pride and joy wash over me. I could feel a change stirring inside me, one that wasn't just about having people around me who respected me for who I was, but about finally respecting myself. I wasn't just the guy who could throw money at problems. I was someone with ideas, values, and the ability to create something of my own. The laughter grew louder as the wine flowed, and I watched my guests enjoying themselves. I moved from one group to the next, exchanging stories. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly seen, not as a source of financial support, not as a provider, but as a man who had worked hard for everything he had. When I finally stepped back to look at everything from a distance, I saw a scene that felt completely different from the Christmases of my past. There was no obligation, no resentment, just joy, respect, and the warmth of genuine connections. It was everything I had needed, and for the first time in years, I felt free. The weight of the years of giving, the emotional manipulation I had endured, started to lift. This wasn't just a Christmas dinner. It was a celebration of who I was and who I was finally allowing myself to be. And as I looked around the room, surrounded by friends and people who truly appreciated me, I realized that this was the family I had been missing all along. The evening was in full swing, laughter echoing through the villa, glasses clinking, and the warmth of good conversation filling the air. I was finally among people who saw me for who I was, not just what I could provide. My friends, my brother, all gathered around, genuinely enjoying themselves. The walls of my home, the very ones that had once felt cold and empty, now seemed to breathe with the life I had always wanted to experience. But just as I was beginning to truly feel at peace, my phone buzzed. It was Brianna. I hesitated for a moment before stepping away from the main gathering and walking into my office to answer. "Dad?" Brianna's voice came through, sharp with anger. "What the hell is this?" I frowned, glancing at the screen. It wasn't like her to call me with such an edge. "What are you talking about?" "The pictures," she spat. "I saw them online. You're hosting a Christmas dinner without me? Without even telling me? Are you serious?" I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. It was exactly what I expected. "You chose to spend Christmas with your in-laws, Brianna. You made it clear that you didn't want me there." She scoffed. "Oh, please. You really think I didn't want to spend time with you? You went behind my back and planned this whole thing, didn't you? You've been hiding all this wealth from me, and now you're using it to punish me." The accusation stung, but I didn't flinch. I had spent so many years being manipulated by her guilt trips, but this time, I wasn't backing down. "This isn't about wealth, Brianna. This is about respect. You chose to exclude me from your Christmas, so I made other plans. I have every right to do that." Her voice wavered between fury and desperation. "You're betraying me, Dad. You're making me look bad. I'm your daughter, for God's sake. I've always needed you. I've always been there for you," I said, my voice calm but firm. "But I can't keep being the one you turn to when it's convenient and ignore me when it's not. I'm not some financial resource, Brianna. I'm your father. But that doesn't mean you get to treat me however you want." She tried to manipulate me with guilt. "How can you do this to me? I'm your only child, and you're turning your back on me just because of some dinner?" I shook my head, refusing to be swayed. "No, Brianna, this isn't about the dinner. This is about how I've been treated for years. I've given, and now I'm standing up for myself. I deserve better than to be used like this." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear her trying to figure out how to respond. Finally, her voice softened, but it was no less manipulative. "But you don't understand. I'm scared. If you cut me off, I'll lose everything. You're all I have. I'm not cutting you off, Brianna, but I am stopping the cycle. This isn't healthy for either of us, and I'm not going to let you control me with guilt anymore." I heard her take a shaky breath, the weight of the conversation sinking in. "I can't believe you're doing this." "Believe it," I said, my tone resolute. "I'm done enabling this behavior. It ends now." She didn't respond immediately, and I could tell the conversation had finally hit a wall. I knew she wasn't ready to hear it, but I was done trying to explain myself. "Goodbye, Brianna," I said before ending the call. As I sat there in the quiet of my office, the weight of the conversation hung in the air. There was no sense of relief, no satisfaction in having had the upper hand. But there was a finality to it. I had made my stand, and there was no going back. I took a deep breath and glanced at the clock. The celebration continued outside, and I wasn't going to let Brianna's manipulation ruin it. I walked back into the main area, my shoulders feeling just a little bit lighter, my resolve stronger than it had ever been before. Tonight was for me. The evening had been nothing short of perfect. The laughter was infectious, the conversation light and genuine, and for the first time in years, I felt truly seen. It wasn't about my wealth or what I could give, it was about who I was as a person. I stood by the bar, glass in hand, chatting with a group of old friends, feeling a sense of camaraderie I hadn't felt in ages. There were no obligations tonight, no expectations beyond enjoying each other's company. But just as I was starting to truly enjoy myself, the sound of banging on the front door broke through the atmosphere. I froze, my hand tightening around the stem of my wine glass. My guests exchanged confused glances. Another knock, louder this time, followed by angry shouting. "Let us in!" a voice yelled from the other side. My heart sank as I recognized the voice. It was Brianna. I exchanged a quick glance with Robert, who stood nearby. His face was unreadable, but I could see the tension in his eyes. Without a word, I walked toward the door, my steps deliberate. I had a feeling I knew what was coming, and I wasn't about to let it ruin the evening I had worked so hard to build. I opened the door, and there stood Brianna, her face flushed with anger. Beside her was Cody, looking uncomfortable, his hands shoved into his pockets as if he were trying to make himself as small as possible. Brianna's eyes flared when she saw me. "Dad, what the hell is going on?" she demanded, her voice trembling with fury. "You think you can just cut me out and throw a party without me, after everything I've done for you?" I stood firm in the doorway, blocking her way. "You chose to exclude me, Brianna. I made other plans. If you don't like it, that's on you." "You can't just do this to me," she shouted, her voice breaking. "You're hiding your wealth, treating me like crap, and I'm supposed to just stand here and take it?" I took a slow breath, my patience running thin. "This isn't about hiding anything. It's about respect. You've used me for years, Brianna, and I've had enough." "Used you?" she scoffed, pushing past me as if to enter. "You've always been the one who could give, so why are you being such a—" "Brianna, stop." I held up a hand to halt her in her tracks. "I'm not doing this tonight. Not with you, not here. This isn't the place for it." But Brianna wasn't done. Her anger had reached a boiling point. "You think you can just shut me out and have everything your way? You've betrayed me, and you're going to pay for it." I was about to say something else when I noticed Cody stepping back, his eyes darting around nervously. The sound of sirens was faint in the distance, and my blood ran cold. Brianna had called the police. I didn't have time to react before the doorbell rang again, followed by an authoritative knock. A police officer stood in the doorway, and Brianna immediately turned to him, launching into a tearful, exaggerated account of what had happened. "Officer, he's refusing to let me in," she said, her voice high-pitched. "He's treating me like I don't matter, and he's been hiding his wealth from me for years. He's cutting me out of the family." The officer turned to me. "Sir, is this true? What's going on here?" I could feel the eyes of my guests on me, but I stood tall, my voice steady as I explained the situation. "My daughter came uninvited, demanding to be let in. I'm hosting a dinner with people who respect me for who I am, not for what I can give. She's upset because I made alternative plans when she chose to exclude me." The officer glanced at Brianna, then back at me. "It sounds like this is a family dispute. I'd suggest you work it out privately, but there's no legal grounds to force entry. If there's no physical altercation, we'll be on our way." Brianna's face flushed with humiliation as the officer turned and began walking back toward his car. She stood there for a moment, frozen, and then, with a sharp exhale, she spun on her heel and stormed off, Cody following her. The tension in the room was palpable, but as soon as the door slammed shut behind them, I felt a wave of relief. Robert and a few others who had witnessed the scene came over to me. "I'm proud of you, man," Robert said, clapping me on the back. "You handled that with more grace than I would have." My guests echoed his sentiment, offering words of support. The evening had been interrupted, but in that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. Brianna had tried to manipulate me once again, but I had stood my ground. I wasn't going to let her ruin my life any longer. The rest of the evening continued, but something had shifted. There was a renewed sense of camaraderie and respect. The drama had come and gone, but I felt lighter than I had in years. For once, I wasn't the one being taken advantage of. For once, I was in control. The night resumed its natural rhythm, but my focus had changed. This dinner was a celebration of more than just a holiday. It was a celebration of my freedom, my strength, and the life I was finally able to live on my own terms. The confrontation at the door had shaken the night, but the evening wasn't over yet. Brianna's dramatic outburst and her subsequent call to the police had left a tense energy hanging in the air. Despite the drama, my guests quickly resumed their conversations, a little more quietly now, but they were still there. I could feel the support in the room, but I needed some space, some quiet to collect myself. I stepped away from the gathering, excusing myself as I walked into my office, shutting the door behind me. I leaned against the desk, my hands gripping the edge as I tried to steady my breath. The chaos from earlier was still fresh in my mind, but I knew this needed to be dealt with. It was inevitable. A soft knock on the door interrupted my thoughts, and before I could say anything, Brianna stepped in. Her eyes were red, her makeup smeared, but the anger still burned beneath the surface. She hesitated at the door, unsure of what to say, but I could see the frustration written all over her face. "Dad," she started, her voice low. I didn't mean for things to get out of hand like that." I turned away, walking to the window, needing the space. "No, Brianna. You didn't mean for it to get out of hand, but that's exactly what always happens, isn't it? You push until I'm backed into a corner, and then you play the victim." I could feel her behind me, her footsteps hesitant as she closed the distance between us. "I'm scared, Dad. I've always needed you. You've been there for me, financially, emotionally, everything. I'm not ready to lose that." Her voice cracked on the last sentence, and a wave of guilt washed over me, but I quickly shoved it aside. I had been too generous with my guilt for years. Now, it was time for the truth. "You're not losing me, Brianna," I said firmly, turning to face her. "But you are losing the right to manipulate me. For years, you've made our relationship about what I can give. Every time I say no, you guilt-trip me into saying yes. Every time I try to stand my ground, you make me feel like I'm abandoning you." Her lips trembled as she took a step closer. "I never meant to use you like that." I shook my head, not allowing myself to soften. "I know you didn't mean to, but that's exactly what you've done. And I've let you. I've let you use me, Brianna, because I wanted to be the father you needed. But what about me? What about my needs? Do you even see me anymore?" The silence between us felt like it stretched on forever, each word I spoke cutting deeper into the facade she had built up over the years. Brianna's eyes filled with tears, and she took another step toward me. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do. You're my dad, and I'm scared of what happens if I can't rely on you." I crossed my arms, trying to keep my composure. "You need to learn how to stand on your own, Brianna. I can't keep carrying you, and I can't keep enabling this behavior. You've built your life around me being the bank, the safety net, the guy who always says yes. But that stops now." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "But I love you, Dad. I didn't mean to hurt you." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to rush in and comfort her. "You do love me, Brianna, but love isn't supposed to be about control. You don't get to treat me like an ATM and expect me to be okay with it. I can't keep letting you manipulate me with guilt. I've spent my whole life doing that, and I'm done." There was a long pause before she finally nodded, her face crumpling with the weight of my words. "I get it. I didn't know what else to do." I sighed, my own heart heavy but resolute. "I know, but now you do, and so do I. I've given you everything I could, but I'm done giving at my own expense." The finality in my voice was unmistakable. I saw it in her eyes as she realized this was not a fight she could win. Not this time. She took a shaky breath and wiped her eyes. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'll go. I don't know how to fix this." I looked at her one last time before turning away. "You'll fix it, Brianna, but you have to do it without me this time. I'm done being your crutch." She didn't respond, and after a long silence, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone in the quiet of my office. For a moment, I just stood there, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I had just severed a tie that had bound me to her for years. It felt like I was losing a part of myself, but at the same time, I knew it was the right thing to do. This wasn't about abandoning her. It was about taking control of my life, for once, and putting my own peace above everything else. I breathed in deeply and walked back into the main room. The sounds of laughter and conversation picked up again as I rejoined my guests. The tension had dissipated, but I felt something lighter in my chest. This wasn't the end, but the beginning of something new for me. Something I had never allowed myself to experience before. Freedom. And as I looked around at my friends and family who truly saw me for who I was, I knew that this Christmas dinner, in the end, was exactly what I needed. After Brianna left, the atmosphere in the villa slowly returned to normal, though I could feel the weight of the confrontation lingering in the air. The guests who had witnessed the entire scene unfold were still processing what had happened. I had expected them to be uncomfortable, maybe even take sides, but instead, they gathered around me, offering words of support and solidarity. Robert was the first to approach. "I'm proud of you, man," he said, his voice firm and genuine. "You've been too good to her for too long. Tonight, you did something for yourself. It's about time." I could see the approval in his eyes. For years, Robert had been one of the few who'd understood the weight I'd carried in silence. The rest of the group began to filter in, their voices low but supportive. One of my old business partners, Frank, patted me on the back. "You've always been the guy who makes everyone else feel better, but you deserve to be treated with respect too. It takes a lot to finally stand up like that." The words hit harder than I expected, stirring something deep inside me. It was as if, in that moment, I realized how much I had let others define me. For so long, I had been the one who said yes, who sacrificed without question. But this was me taking control of my own life. Another friend, Jessica, who I had known for years but had never shared much personal history with, spoke up. "It's so easy to get trapped in these toxic family dynamics. We've all had our own struggles with people who just see us as a means to an end. But I can tell you this, tonight was about you reclaiming yourself. You set boundaries, and that's not easy." The room seemed to agree, nodding in unison, and I felt a sense of camaraderie that had been absent for so long. This was what true family was. Not the people who expected something from you every time they called, but the ones who understood your struggles and stood by you without asking for anything in return. I smiled, the pride in my chest swelling as the conversations flowed effortlessly around me. It wasn't just about what I had, my villa, my wealth, my success. It was about how far I had come. And the people in this room, they didn't just respect me for what I had. They admired me for the man I had become. As the evening went on, the conversations turned lighter. People laughed, joked, and shared stories. But the underlying tone was one of mutual respect. No one was talking about what they could get from me. They were celebrating me for who I was. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was more than just a financial resource to people. In the midst of it all, Robert came over to me again, this time with a glass of wine in his hand. "You know, I've been watching you for years," he said with a grin. "And tonight, I'm proud of you. I'm proud to call you my brother. I think this is the start of something big for you." I raised my glass to him, feeling the weight of his words sink in. "Thanks, Robert. You've always had my back." As the night stretched on, I found myself thinking back to all the years of feeling like I didn't belong, of being used and overlooked. But now, I knew better. The people around me tonight were my true family. They saw me, not as a bank, but as a man who had worked hard to build something of his own. The evening wasn't about the food, the drinks, or the villa. It was about something much more important: respect. Real, genuine respect. And as the guests continued to celebrate, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. For the first time, I wasn't just providing for others. I was finally being appreciated for who I was. As I looked around the room, I realized something important. Family wasn't just about blood. It was about the people who had your back, who respected you, and who genuinely valued your presence, not just what you could give them. The last guests had just left, their laughter and warmth lingering in the air, but the villa was now still, silent. I stood by the window, looking out at the darkened city below. The night had been everything I had hoped for. It wasn't just the delicious meal, the sparkling decorations, or the elegant ambiance. It was the sense of freedom, of finally being surrounded by people who truly valued me, people who respected me, not for what I could give, but for who I was. The realization settled in slowly, like the weight of a burden finally lifted. The emotional toll of years of manipulation, of giving without receiving, had been exhausting. For so long, I had been trapped in a cycle of pleasing others, sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of my family, especially Brianna. But tonight, everything had changed. I had reclaimed control over my life, not by cutting off Brianna, but by standing up for myself and refusing to be controlled any longer. I wasn't the man who simply handed out money when it was asked for, or the one who stayed silent when his boundaries were violated. I was someone who had built something for himself, someone who could finally say, enough. The phone call with Brianna, the confrontation at the villa, and the final conversation in my office, all of it had been difficult but necessary. It had shown me just how far I'd come. I wasn't angry at her anymore, not really. I was disappointed, but more than that, I was proud of myself for finally standing up. I wasn't going to be manipulated by guilt any longer. I walked through the empty villa, each room echoing with the sounds of the evening, laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft hum of conversation. I had poured so much of myself into this place, into my success, but I had never truly celebrated it before. I had always kept my head down, afraid to acknowledge how far I had come. But now, standing here in the quiet, I could see how much I had accomplished. This villa was a testament to that, not just in terms of wealth, but in terms of the resilience it had taken to get here. I thought back to all the times I had looked at this house and thought, it's not enough. I need more to be happy. But tonight, I realized something important. It wasn't about the size of the house or the amount of money I had. It was about the freedom to live my life authentically, to surround myself with people who didn't need me to be someone else, someone who could only provide for them. I had been afraid of letting go for so long, afraid of losing family, of losing what I thought was love. But tonight, I had experienced something different, a real connection with people who didn't just love me for what I could do for them, but because they respected who I was. That was the kind of family I wanted. The future stretched out before me, full of possibilities. I wasn't weighed down by the fear of disappointing anyone anymore. I could finally plan my own life, without guilt, without obligation, and without the burden of being used. For the first time in decades, I felt free. The chains that had held me in place for so long had broken, and I was ready to live on my own terms. As I turned off the lights and made my way to the door, I smiled to myself. Tomorrow, I would begin the life I had always wanted. I'd finally have the chance to travel, to explore, to enjoy life without the constant strain of family expectations hanging over me. There were things I had neglected, hobbies, friendships, experiences that had always been pushed aside for the sake of others. But now, I could embrace them all. And as I stepped outside into the cool night air, the weight of the past years lifted entirely. I was no longer just the giver. I was the one who would live his life with authenticity and joy. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The future was mine to create, and I was ready to live it, fully and freely, for the first time in years.